says, "Good morning, Hank. It's Monday on the 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Good morning, Hank! It's Monday!
Thank you. A lot of people in the audience are like, what just happened?
Okay, I don't think these young men need any introduction, but I will make them anyway. David Levithan is a young adult fiction editor and award-winning author. His first book, Boy Meets Boy, was published in 2003. He's written numerous works featuring strong male homosexual characters, most notably Boy Meets Boy and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. And this is very interesting. At 19, Levithan received an internship at Scholastic Corporation, where he began working on the Babysitter Club series. Yes, 17 years later, he's still there as an editorial director. And he's the founding editor of Push, a young adult imprint of Scholastic, focusing on new voices and new authors. And Push publishes edgier material for young adults, and is where Patricia McCormick got her start with the book Cut. You say that you learned how to write books that were both funny and touching from Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And your first collaboration with Rachel Cohen was 2006's Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, which was adapted for the big screen in 2008. And your newest novel, Love is the Higher Law, will be published in August, or was that last August? Okay. All right. And John Green lives in Indianapolis. He's come out here from Indianapolis. He's the American author of young adult fiction and a YouTube vlogger. I don't suppose we might have one or two nerd fighters in the audience. All right. John's first novel, Looking for Alaska, won not only the Michael Prince Award presented by the American Library Association, but also made ALA's 2005 Top 10 Best Books for Young Adults. Second book, An Abundance of Catherines, was a Prince Award honor book and a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize.
They lost.
And you've also collaborated with fellow young adult authors Maureen Johnson and Lauren Miracle on Let It Snow. Interconnected short stories that take place in the same small town on Christmas Eve during a massive snowstorm. And John's story is called A Cheertastic Christmas Miracle. And the book was a New York Times bestseller. You've also written Paper Towns, which won the Edgar Award for Best Young Adult. And you've now collaborated with David Levithan on this book, Will Grayson, Will Grayson, which was just and debuted at number 3 on the New York Times bestseller.
You're clapping for yourself. Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, so what I'm interested in today is how your first collaboration, Will Grayson, came about.
You start.
I'll start. I'm trying to take this out because then you guys can see each other if I'm a little farther back. It started, actually, for me it started in college because I had, well, at college where I went, there was a guy named David Levithan, whose name was shockingly similar to my own. And we would always be mistaken for each other. I would get his mail, I would get his phone calls. He had one great aunt who would call me and I'd be like, wrong David, she didn't get it, she'd continue to talk to me. And the most humorous and soul-crushing for me part about it was that David is an amazing dancer. He now dances with the Mark Morris Dance Group, which is the best modern dance company in America, if not the world. And so people would constantly come up to me and be like, oh my God, David, you seem like such a clumsy, oafish guy. But last night on stage, you were beauty incarnate. And I'd be like, yeah, that wasn't me. So a week before I graduated, I had never met David, and I just called him up and just like, we have to meet up. I've been getting your phone calls, I've been getting your compliments. And we did, and we totally hit it off, and we both ended up moving to New York together at about the same time and became best friends. And so it was strange having a best friend who has pretty much your name, and so I've always been fascinated by similar or identical names. And so after Nick and Nora, I wanted to do another collaboration. I thought it would be cool to do it with guy writers instead, this time to have a different dynamic. And I love the notion of doing a book about different characters who all have the same name. And John and I had struck up a friendship because I had read an advanced reader's copy of Looking for Alaska, which I'd loved, and so I sent him a fanboy email just being like, hey, I love your book. And he was all giddy when he wrote me back. And so we ended up like talking on the phone pretty much every Friday afternoon for a while, and then finally I popped the question, was just like, hey, I have this. And he said, I do. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to do it because I really liked David's writing. I loved Boy Meets Boy, and I just read The Realm of Possibility right before we started talking, and loved it as well. And I thought it would be a great, I just thought it would be a great opportunity to write with someone of David's caliber. I thought the idea was really interesting. At that time, I was really interested in questions of identity and the relationship between chosen identities and the identities that you inherit in the form of your name and stuff. And so I thought it would be a really cool, interesting project. And so I said yes. And then 5 short years later, here we are.
So literally it took you 5 years to write?
Well, yeah, but we did some other stuff.
We read a few other novels in the interim, but I mean, basically we would go back and forth, or we write simultaneously. The book is structured like an X. And so at the beginning, all we did was we chose Will's name and we chose where and when they would meet. But that was it. That was all the planning we did. And so we wrote our first chapters parallel to each other, the tips of the X.
But wait a minute. You said, did you each write a character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we each wrote.
Talk about that.
So I wrote chapter 1 while David was writing chapter 2, and the idea was that we were each going to write from the perspective of one Will Grayson. So when we got together to read each other those chapters, we had no idea. David didn't know that there was going to be a Tiny Cooper, and I didn't know that his Will Grayson was going to be all lowercase. We didn't know any of that. So we started here, and all we knew is that in a few weeks, in the time inside the novel, they needed to be at the same place at the same time in a situation in which they could become aware of one another. And so we wrote toward that, but we wrote parallel. So while David was writing chapter 4, I was writing chapter 3. And because we read it out loud to each other, we never actually saw one another's texts. We only knew one another's story from having it read to us. So that, I think, was really important.
That's so interesting. So your literary journey was really very much like your character's physical journey in terms that, you know, you didn't know what would happen.
Not at all. I mean, I wrote my first chapter having no idea that Tiny Cooper was going to come into my character's life. Compounding and flouncing as he does into my character's life. But it was fun because I heard John's first chapter and I was like, Tiny Cooper, I can use that. And so as we were going our parallel ways, getting closer and closer to the crux of the X, we were looking at what the other person and hearing it, and sort of going, okay, once they cross, this is where it's going to affect the trajectory of my story. So that was neat. But yeah, we totally didn't know what was going to happen.
Which I think was very helpful for writing the book, but then it also created a situation in which we had to spend a lot of time working on revision. We revised this book for a long, long time.